This movement was the foundation for January 6th. They were the moving elements that made January 6th and the insurrection happen. And now we have a Speaker of the House who is an avowed Christian nationalist.
This is very much in line with the overall attack on trans people writ large, because this is actually a focus by the Christian nationalist movement on anything that they consider to be outside of the gender binary.
So they put their loyalty to Trump and God before Constitution and country. I think it is the most heinous threat, and it is the largest domestic threat you could possibly think of at any point in our country. Right now it's happening.
You're going to hear words like Christian nationalism, like the new apostolic reformation. These are groups that you should get very schooled on, because they have a lot of power in Trump's circle. And the one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
I love that last part. That last part's actually my favorite part, because it's so revealing of what's actually behind all this. You see, Christian nationalism is a communist word for you. And what it means is, if you are one, do you practice your faith? Well, if you do, you're a Christian nationalist. If you don't practice it, they're not worried about you. Joining me now, Pastor Douglas Wilson, a man who knows all about this, senior minister at Christ Church out of Moscow, Idaho. Pastor, this rhetoric around Christian nationalism, every time I dig into who a Christian nationalist is, it always comes off like just a person who's a Christian.
Yeah, pretty scary stuff, right? I would add one thing to it. It's someone who is a Christian in public. So you can be a Christian behind your eyeballs and between your ears. And if you keep it there, you're fine. But if you try to act as though you were a Christian in any kind of public way, they're going to be all over you like white on rice.
Mm-hmm. Pastor, can you explain, because this is one of the things that has driven me insane about America's Christian church. They seem to be, I don't know, naive. I would probably classify it as naive, if I'm being really kind, to the threat that is facing them from, honestly, from the dirty commies in this country. They've very clearly begun the attack on the Christian church in a million different ways, and yet you can hardly get a pastor to turn on the news anymore. My own pastors, I've had to shake them awake before. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I think we're very clearly in the early stages of our own cultural revolution, like Mao attempted. I think there are some differences. I think the potential for resistance is great, but I do believe that they have decided to make their move. Up to this point, it's been, we can all get along. There was at least a pretense of everybody has a place at the table, and then they would sort of submarine your efforts surreptitiously off to the side. They would cheat. Right. But now it's open and naked. Now it is just out there. And I have some hope that the sleeping evangelical world is going to be rattled and shaken up by some of the more recent events. The radical discrepancy between what is tolerated on the left, the riots after George Floyd's death, for example, and the incursion into the Capitol with elderly people staying between the velvet ropes, and the crackdown on the one and the free pass given to the other. If they didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all.
Pastor, I agree with you to some extent, but I'm not sure I am as hopeful as you are about it waking up the American church. Now, maybe I'm seeing it, maybe I'm not seeing it, but I have not seen this overwhelming unity from America's pastors and elders leading the church to stand up against this. Yes, there'll be a brave man like yourself pop up now and then, but I don't see a lot of what I think I should see right now. Am I missing it?
Yeah, so I would make a distinction. I don't think we differ I don't think there is a concerted response yet from evangelical leadership, from pastors.
Yeah.
There ought to be, but there isn't. There are very few pastors who are in the trenches the way they ought to be. But if anybody's looking around for evidence of blowback, evidence of some sort of resistance, you don't have to look very far. So the egregious misbegotten trial in New York brought by Alvin Bragg and the conviction of President Trump on these this circus. There's just independent of what the charge was and whether the charge was true or false. The way the trial was conducted, the way the thumb was on the scales the whole time, the way the judge didn't allow certain testimony into court, the whole thing was just a pig's breakfast. Just bad. So that's being done in public. All the cameras are running, and people are chortling. The liberal talking heads are chortling over it. But in the meantime, if you just look at a few indicators that would not have been there before, when Trump went to a rally in New Jersey, and there were 100,000 people there in New Jersey. New Jersey's a blue state. How does that happen, right? Biden's rallies look like some downtown bus station at 2 a.m. It's not nothing's there. And then when Trump goes to the Bronx and there's 25,000 people show up, and then when you see the reception he got at the UFC fight after the conviction, there are a number of indicators to me that show that the people are well ahead of their official leadership. Okay, the people are well ahead of the leadership, because the leadership is still beholden to the idea of respectability from the establishment. They don't want to do anything that is going to get them discredited or called a racist or rejected as an extremist. They still care too much about the plaudits and the compliments of the world.
Pastor, for the American Christian, obviously the church has been watered down some, as happens, especially in a society that's been so accommodating to Christianity. And now when you implore Christians, oftentimes when I'm imploring Christians to get involved, I know politics is dirty. That's why you have to get involved. We need you there. It feels so yucky, and it feels almost wrong. I can see it in their face where they just, I should just be turning the other cheek. I don't want to make Susie up the road mad at me when I run for school board. After all, what would you say to that Christian who is struggling with the fact that they need to fight right now? They don't feel like they should fight, of course, because they learned about hippie Jesus in church, but they need to fight.
Yeah, what they need to do is they need to name what they're doing more accurately. So the narrative that they're giving themselves, the narrative they're telling themselves in their own heads is, I'm above this sort of thing. I don't want to be a selfish, grasping person, right? That's what they're telling themselves. I want to be selfless. I want to be above the fray. But what they're actually doing is they're saying, I want someone else to do my dirty work for me, right? I don't expect my suburban life to go up in flames. I want it to be protected, but I don't want to be one of the people doing the protecting. But that's opposite of what a Christian ethos ought to be. You can't just say, I want to be comfortable, I want to be cozy, and I want someone else to carry the burden. That's not Christian. The Lord calls us to a life of sacrifice, involvement, rolling up your shirt sleeves. You can't look at the guy beat up by the side of the road and cross over to the other side of the road and go on because you don't want to get involved. Helping beat up guys by the side of the road might be troublesome. It might be dirty. It might be difficult. There might be challenges. But the Lord told that parable, a very pointed parable, for a reason. You can't just wash your hands of it and say, I have nothing to do with this. There is such a thing as a sin of omission. A lot of Christians just feel good as long as they don't take up the weapon in their own hands and do the dirty deed. But if they stand by while someone else is doing it and they have the power and the authority to intervene and they don't do that, that's a sin of omission. And a lot of Christians need to learn to call it what it is, which is ultimately cowardice.